and welcome to the Weird Rap Podcast, episode 9. I'll be interviewing one of the greatest rap lyricists of all time, Andrew Mbaruk. We're debuting not only the Rap Grifters segment, but the Weird Rap Horoscopes series with Kool. And to start off, I'll be talking with one of my all-time favorites from the Anticon Collective, from groups like Subtle, Themselves, 13 and God, and more. It's the unparalleled poet, MC, and composer, Doseone.
Row. All right.
So, your music and your art, to me in general, has always been confusing. The language is very stylized and cryptic. The listener, I'm not sure if they're invited to contemplate and try to interpret, or if it's meant just for a specific extra smart person that can decrypt your code. So I'm just curious, what is your intention as far as getting a message across to your audience, and who is it meant for?
So definitely meant for the seeker, but it's not meant for anyone in particular. So there's no piece of pie cut out that I'm avoiding. That said, reared on rap, got into whatever avant rap, the amazing artists that preceded me, and then sort of got into like really good poetry at the same time. And what happened was the way prose can be interpreted constantly. Our tight word choice is actually mulled over quite a bit, so it's not categorical. And the intent is that it's more like rapped prose with respect to how I guess it would ultimately be deciphered or processed. So meant to be read and rapped. And then what happens is, I think where it gets harder to follow is when I adhere to my own sort of outer boundaries of what good technical expressive rap is. So then I'm doing complex prose quickly, and that, or broken up in a way that fits a cadence. So that kind of makes it feel obtuse, but it's meant to be digestible. That said, smart helps, and also liking lyrics helps. I don't think I'm where you start with lyrics. You know?
Yeah, I can definitely appreciate it from like a base level of beautiful use of language, even though I'm not necessarily understanding what you might be trying to say. A lot, or most of the time, to be honest, for me, but I'm no genius.
Working on my medicine phase, dull eyes, cold tie, my 15-minute break, coiled eye, life around that snake. My whole record for reckless does need a little race. Hey, out of them bad, I'm a favorite shape. Know me what it say, do class, but I'm the ape like a life preserver, cast out of lead weights. My calendar grinds, it's keep the dates. Dreaming of a boss in a human flesh cake.
Do you feel like there's a certain set of listeners that really get what you're trying to express?
That's not really my concern when I create, I guess, if I'm honest. You know, I think that there probably are, but they will be slightly off, like I am about my favorite prose, like Galway Canal stuff or whatever. I could think some whole shits about his brother. It's not at all. I don't know. You know, so I think it's relative. I do think there's some people who get it. I think what's most important is that it makes writers want to write if they're into my shit. That's probably what I do give a fuck about, is that it's inspiring to someone who is challenging themselves with composition and word, you know? So that's probably who I care about. And then I guess second tier is like, I care about styling that's always been a factor. Like,
Yeah.
so it's two weird, two rather disconnected bass lines that I always keep. One is like, you can read these raps and they make a poetic sense and you can interpret them, but they're bulletproof in their own way. And then the other one is that I'm styling. So one is from rap, the other is from appreciating prose, which only came because I ate so much rap.
Yeah, I can definitely identify with that. Now, you're speaking of your poetic influence, and I wonder, were these like Dadaist or surrealist poets, or am I right in drawing a comparison to those fields of art? Or
yeah, I think so I read there was a time where I was just consuming everything, and I can't say I fell in love with everything I consumed, but I do have a bunch of favorites. It's not so much Dadaist, but once Dadaist happened, it was kind of in everybody's shit. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't say that it's not. So I think really big inspirations. I got into the beats through the main dining hall, which is, Kerouac crap, but then eventually paled in comparison to the Corso and Bob Kaufman poems that truly inspired me. Also, I mean, things like Howl are pretty fucking perfect. And then Galway Cannell and Marilyn Hacker. I love Dylan Thomas, and there's a bunch of that shit that I don't get. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. It gets biblical. And that's just like what words were floating around as usable back then. But I think, and I'm trying to think, and then after that, I loved David Berman's book. Sadly, there's only the one, Rip, so.
I'm not familiar.
Oh, Actual Air. You should get it. You can totally get it on Glamazon or whatever. That's really good. It's one of my favorite contemporary books of poetry. So, and then the other massive influence, I'd be amiss to not bring it up, is like my peers. So Yoni and, we were all the ones hipping each other to these various calibers of writing and then trying to incorporate it into verse rap crap. And, some of it worked better than others, but that was pretty much it. And then what those dudes did was the most inspiring stuff to me too. Poetic rap was just as inspiring to me as poetry itself.
Yes. Yeah, I was thinking about your early days as establishing yourself as an MC with Scribble Jam, facing Eminem and Peace battling, and how it really did seem in some ways like a cultural clash. There was like a kind of large backlash in a way from what you might call the traditional hip-hop world against Anti-Con, and just the way you presented yourselves, I think, was seen as somehow an affront to the culture, coming to hip-hop in battle mode, as you seem to very much be at the time. What, in your mind, did you feel like you were battling? And was it satisfying? And were you surprised at the kind of backlash you received at times? Or were you trying to antagonize more straight-laced traditionalists?
So lots to unpack there. There's like, truthfully, like as that happened. So the first one, when Eminem is there, I am in the process of weirding and recording and becoming myself in ways beyond just rapping forever on a corner, which is how I started. So when dude, I'm going to kill this cat. Sorry, 1 second. So when that was happening, 97, that was like I was recording my first things and still becoming myself, and I was way more consumed and into that. So battling was sort of an aside. I was not trying to make a career of it. I was just in Cincinnati and a very good battler. That was all I did for a very long time. So when I was a fucking nightmare to know, it was in New Jersey and in my first battle crew, which was the Skill Scavengers, and we just served people all the time. I was pretty intense. So we would just destroy people. It was very brutal. What I did in 97 was like almost still, it was me transitioning into other things, ways of freestyle, things I was doing. And so there was like a bit of almost sea legs as I was reequating into battling. Luckily, Rhymefest was so garbage, I could just finish his lines for him. And all those guys were cheating. So like, I'd never kick written. So I have like strong, like I was saying, when I go to hip hop heaven or hell gates, they're going to scan me. I'm just walking into heaven. You know, like I have very strong convictions and I never kick writtens, nothing premeditated. I was raised in an era of just dismantling others anywhere. Bathroom, fucking alley, hallway, doesn't matter. You know, so go into those, it was very confusing. Also, like when you serve someone on the street, everybody goddamn knows who fucking won. It's not a contest, you know? It's like, there's more of a distance running and the threat of violence compounded with having to serve someone. And that's the battling that I came up in. And that was the sort of energy that got me out of being a violent kid and into being creative, and writing and doing songs came later. I didn't, until I met Jay Rawls in Cincinnati, which is exactly that time in 97. I never knew anyone that had equipment. He had a 4-track and an ASR 10. Everyone I knew maybe had 1-2 turntables, you know, but so that was all happening and beginning while I was in that battle. So it was a little weird. And Eminem kicked all writtens in that battle, and then they were cheating and they put Rhymefest back in and made me battle Eminem. And Eminem and I were like hanging out at the bar like, your shit's dope. And he said the same thing. And then he gave me his tape. And then the battle was like all shiesty and people I knew doing this bullshit judging, letting Juice and Rhymefest do whatever they want. And then, so I was all pissed. And then I listened to Eminem's tape and everything he kicked was written. And I was like, fuck this dude. And then next thing you know, he becomes this, Mickey Mouse of fucking rap. And so then the next scribble, though, with Peace and Ab and all those dudes, that was uncomfortable because when I battle, I don't want to be friends. So there's no playing. I think that's how those guys came up, you know? It's not about organized battling. You serve someone you fucking don't like, or that is coming for you, or that needs their head taken, you know? And so being in a battle with people that I literally was deeply influenced and inspired by really didn't feel right. And again, I was super uncomfortable.
And I'm gonna tell you something from one artist to another. You really don't do what I thought you would. I mean, I heard so much about you. You're a great battle and one, the ass nagger. But then you come and you're really quite pathetic. You don't say much. And really, I'm not impressed, but you can kiss my butt.
You know, my best battles are unrecorded, my best freestyles and stuff like that, but it was still interesting. And when I did that stuff, I guess you were asking if it was trying to agitate. I was a dick. You know, I definitely would take anybody's heart, you know, and just like seeing how hard people could rap, you know, and good rappers love me. Mediocre rappers and looky-loos did not like me, you know, because I don't do punchlines. I would just, also at that time is when I was starting to style, because, you know, you start rapping slow well and speed it up gradually.
Yeah.
So all that shit, it was interesting. Also, I will say, today, I'd love to serve a motherfucker. It's something I miss deeply. I also miss, you know, like, I used to be a strong safety. I miss tackling people at full speed. Like certain, I've been in business meetings where I'm like, if I could just tackle you, I would be so happy. Same thing with serving. I love it. It's something I'll always be. It's why I got into rap. I think accessing that energy is how I stick a verse, whether it's about something lovely or whack MCs. So, it was important for a while, but doing that organized shit is what turned me off. And battling, and then I knew after that, if I kept doing battles and flying to them and shit, I was just going to end up battling more people that I kind of appreciate, and that is dishonest. It's like phony. I can't really say the worst thing I can think of to people that I deeply respect, So, and then, we got hated on, but I'll tell you what, a lot of that was just about dropping posturing. Like, I stopped posturing early, and I got called gay. It was like pretty insanely homophobic, even by what you would account now as like woke rappers and shit. So the reality is that now I'm so glad we actually have gay rappers. Fucking eat it, So it's like back then I would just wear a fucking Hawaiian shirt, man, and shake my hips, and someone would call me gay on a message board. It was amazing. We'd just fucking, and then, and it was a thing that kind of followed me throughout, and what I would do is when I would get that energy, I would just be like, do you want to get served by, I don't know what to fucking say to these dudes. So it was very interesting. And so that was always a paradigm. And Anticon, I was not the far end of artsy. I was artsy, but I also did this battling stuff. So basically there was this weird space I had to hold where I'm trying to just cut loose and be me, but I also would have to step back and be enforcer every once in a while of my own behalf or someone around me.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're basically saying you had this built-in aggression and even still have like a built-in aggressive, possibly violent tendency, and that was a way for you to kind of exercise it. And
100%. And it's, I'll be honest, battle rapping may sound severe to some people, but it is a true degressing of that energy and where that came from. And for me, I felt like, it's the best space. Fucking insult someone. It's a blast. Everybody's got to grow up, toughen up a little bit. I think, but it's interesting. And then I still watch a lot of battle rap every once in a while. It went to this whole, just the opposite of my personal paradigm, which is
right.
Improvising it. So, but that said, some of the stuff is amazing. You can't hate on the preparedness of but my thing that always bugged me about new culture, as nasty as some of the dudes are and dudettes, is it's like fucking a research. Like in my day, you would just see someone in an elevator and it's on, and these motherfuckers are like Facebooking them and listening to their music. And I find it to be this, I know they get down and it's nasty and abusive when they spit. However, the actual process is more like crafting a fucking...
Yeah, it's very nerdy.
This is your life. It's very loving. It's fucking research, man. It's it's totally appreciation. And
that's
awareness.
a nice way of thinking of it.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, and I definitely heard the aggression also in your first album, or the first album that I heard of yours, at least, Hemispheres, where it seems like you're battling some invisible MCs in that.
Yeah.
Kindly be a good disgruntled fan. Grab a scavenger's pen and make your way to the stands. Neo placebo man, for despite need quill and red in hand. You're out of touch ink and temporal sands. Mosey that swollen ignorance gland and color-coded parochial clan. On back to fleeting industrial dreamland. I mean, damn, where's the intent and integrity? Little lamb, all but essentially you've absorbed quite enough of my intensity.
You kind of suggested that was a way for you to work through it or work it out in a certain way, because I don't hear the same aggression, although I do hear some in your music still. But would you say that you've changed in relation to competition and battling over the years?
Yeah. I mean, some of the alpha stuff is meant to be tapping that vein, and it holds that line, but some of it also has like a bromance to it, you know, it's a little slowed down and one voice, you know. But in general, the aggression just became like a modification of style, you know, but what I was choosing to express was all sorts of things, some of it aggressive and some of it aggressively. Also, I enjoyed doing non-aggressive prose in intense ways. So for me, it just became, it would have been monochromatic for me to prescribe that aggression permanently, you know. So it became part of the array. So did being melodic, double time, triplets, slow rap, spoken word breakdowns, you know, all that stuff. Freestyling for a small chunk of a song, whatever it is. So I feel like everything became, you know, canon and fodder once I got into it. But the aggression, I think I always wanted to hear something different from myself and the people around me with the music they were making. So aggression happened when the music called for it after a certain point, which is pretty much Hemispheres. Because like the Them record already is stretching and doing some different things, you know. So, yeah. And then...
But it seemed like you went back to it on like Crowns Down, right?
Yes, 100%. I mean, that's the thing is about the next piece I'm working on is probably what we would call aggressive. You know, I think it's something I do really well and uniquely. I've done a lot. It's a lot of my life, you know, I grew up with a lot of trauma, and now I'm in a space where things are good. I'm trying to fill my life with kindness and considered fucking thought, you know. That said, when I make some shit, because of that, I want yang to this yin, and I definitely want to get intense because artistically is where that's safe for me to do, you know. I'm not one of those people that wiles out in the fucking Target about masks and gets to get it out there or keys a car. I don't do, you know, I just fucking can unleash in a way most people don't. I get to scream for 4 hours recording a song, you know, so it's really, it's cathartic, and I definitely enjoy that. And I've done a ton of music, so now I'm just doing what is really speaking to me next, and I know when I'm done. So it's cool. I'm definitely, there will be more aggression. It is in the cards.
Cool. Well, I mean, I'm a very non-aggressive person, very calm. It's hard to make me angry, but I love that aggression. So I'm happy to hear you're going to continue with that. And you briefly mentioned your project Alpha with Mestizo, which I loved. Is there any chance of follow-up to that project?
Yes, there's a standing threat to do another record. We're just, you know, both been busy doing stuff. He's daddy. He has many babies. Yeah. And living, but we really want to, we will. Standing threat for 13 and God, that's way more complicated to execute. And I think other than that, I have, I've always wanted to do an ambient record, so I did that. I'll be dropping that kind of soonish. I'm basically like bucket listing at this point because I would always stop myself from doing things because I wanted like a record to do well. Yeah, I've removed that from the equation, and I'm back to where I started, where it's like what's pulling me, and I make it. So, and then I do all these game soundtracks, which is like most of my time because I like to just be inspired when I work now, and I have the privilege of doing that. So, but the next thing I'm doing is like pretty 90s rap. Got an SP, and I've been teaching myself to make the music I grew up on in my own way. You know, no, it's not a derivative. It just is the methods of that shit.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear it. Do you think that explaining the meanings behind your art can take the magic out of it or take away from the experience that you'd like the audience to have with it? I ask that because I want to ask some specific questions.
No. Yeah, so I'm down for questions. I just feel like the answer is like A and B because there's sometimes it's amazing to understand exactly what I'm talking about, or it's humorous. And then the B-side to that is that sometimes people want things explained that have no further explanation, therefore they get let down.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So yeah, go ahead, hit me with any specifics.
Well, I guess actually a precursor question is, does it always mean something? Or are you ever actually doing Dada meaningless?
No, I'm never doing anything meaningless. At times it's, I guess cryptic would be the most critical yet positive way to do it, but it's just broken language.
All right.
A lot of things are also referential to other work and other people's work, and that doesn't always, I think, come across.
Yeah.
Unless you have context,
Okay, so your album from last year, G is for Job, which I love. I would, if I had done a top 10 list or whatever of 2020, it would definitely be on there.
Awesome.
And it's, in reference to the album G is for Deep, which came out, I don't know, 6 years prior?
Maybe more, but yes.
Okay,
8?
so...
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. In any case, both of these albums really totally baffle me as far as what the title means, and I wonder if you could talk about it.
So, G is for Deep was a typo on a folder that had the first songs in it. And I was like, I fucking really like this. And it plays on, G is for Gangster. So, and then G is for Job. I had to get this job right after I finished G is for Deep and bail myself out of all the music debt that I had accrued gradually across my career. Because it was like at a stifling point. So I got this fucking job. And as I got the job, I recorded like almost half of G is for Job. So like the month after I mixed G is for Deep, I recorded a great deal of G is for Job in single sittings in my living room. And then I would later, over the years, refine it and add to it. So it was like this fever fucking dream of needing to make this music as I got a job. I don't know if it was childish or artistic, but whatever was happening was fucking happening.
All of them codes you first became in high school. Got no power back. That's me. I grew up on rap. Shut up inside you. Night skin.
So I just titled that one G is for Job, and then it was from the same era as it progressed, which kind of became, to an extent, my path to how my production sounds, which got developed across those two records and all the video game soundtracks. And so, and then having all these jobs, everything being about that, it was just perfectly appropriate. So that was kind of what happened. I don't think I'll do another G thing. I think it's just those two at this point. TBD, though, I guess. G is for Jesus.
This is making me wonder, does that album or any of your albums have like a through line as far as a theme or a concept, or is it more like just a bunch of different disparate songs?
So, 13 and God, both records have a through line, and all of the subtle works have a through line that is super specific. They also reference all the other groups and bands and works. So I pull lines from whether it's Yoni or my own writing on another project, whether it's Themselves or Cloud Dead. Those are all pulled in. And then within the context of the narrative that goes across Subtle and goes across 13 and God, I pull from those two records. So actually quite a bit, and I'm sure the people who like and absorb my music the most realize that it's all connected. So And then, like, a lot of motifs are constantly recurring and still recurring for me. So
Yeah.
that's how I look at the connectivity. There is not like, you know, you are not following Bruce Wayne from the age of 20 to 40, you know, but it is, there is graduation reference to the time those things occurred in, as well as self-referential shit to myself and the music I appreciate and the music my peers made. So now that is, I'll tell you what, that is what's the most Dadaist, is a lot of the ways that the Anticon members really stole from each other and lent their verses to other people's lines and shit, and did that across time. I think that is something that was pretty cool. Also being liberally stealing lines from other people in and out of context. And like Back Against the Record Machine is in a Cloud Dead song, and I think that's fucking Van Halen. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like there's all kinds of things that we stole and pulled. So yeah, there's it is can be connected. It definitely is for me as the player. You know, I don't know how it is as the viewer, though. I do think different things pop out to different people, and it's loaded work.
Yeah. I've always felt like there was some code that if I really spent my time, I could figure out, okay, what does teeth mean? What does arms mean? I could kind of apply it.
You can. It is all there, actually, and it is like stated over and over if you read along. All of those are...
So what are teeth and what are arms?
Well, both are distinctly connected to mortality and giving your all, but the concept of like giving your right arm, you know, giving something you can't get back, which is your lifetime, your youth, you know, so your days. So that is a strong motif. That is a middle class or lesser motif. And that is one that runs throughout. Teeth are also mortality. They, you know, you only roll them over once. And then also teeth are a strong anxiety mile marker. So a lot of I think teeth splits two ways. Arm is primarily that, and then blood kind of comes from arm, which all came from this IV testing arm that I bought in a thrift shop. That we would carry around with Subtle, and then Dax got paralyzed, and I was like, why the fuck am I talking about arms all the time? And now my best friend doesn't have full control of his arms, and so it just became something that I let go of knowing what it meant and just let it progress and become its own thing. So, you know, that one in particular, and some other motifs were really things that I was... following, not leading people toward, you know, so exactly what they meant is something I was always fleshing out, as opposed to they were a summary or a code or an abbreviation for a greater meaning. It was more of a meaning over time thing.
Awesome. Going back a little further, what is a Kugel?
Kugel, noodle Kugel. You don't know any Jews? You need to have Jew friends.
I am a Jew.
You are? You don't know what Kugel is?
Is that a pastry or something?
Yeah, noodle Kugel. No, noodle Kugel is like fucking... I fed it to a woman who wasn't Jewish once, and she was like, it's like dessert lasagna. It's basically this long...
I looked it up on Google. Did you misspell it or something?
Oh, I'm sure I misspelled it, but Kugel is a Jewish delicacy. It's like it's a noodle dessert cake.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not sure why we named it that. I think
you spelled it Cougel, and I always liked the sound of that title, Lyrical Kugel. It reminded me of like a misspelling of cougar or something.
If you want some straight dope, I've misspelled a lot of things. I misspelled skeleton repellent on the jewel case. I didn't realize that the graffiti writer I had do the vinyl cover of the original Hemispheres, he spelled it Hemispheres. I never noticed. So spelling, I can write, but I cannot spell. I was dyslexic, and I don't give a shit.
I consider myself a pretty good speller, and I actually never noticed either of those mistakes. So I think you're probably more or less safe.
Okay, good.
Okay, Crowns Down, the title of your third Themselves project. That's you with Gel on production, of course. What's the meaning of that title, and how does it relate to the rest of the album?
So, Free Houdini and Crowns Down were like a return to our roots of making the kind of music that inspires us and formed us, which is sort of like rapping man's rap, but our way, the way that Jeff chooses to produce and make choices in production, and the way that I do that about rapping and lyrics. Very unique, but we are sort of like, I think within our respective circles, we were like little prodigies, and that's how we met. And that's the energy we shared and accessed a lot when we were creating, was like, I guess in a weird childish way, it's how I always envision like Gangstar being put together. Jeff and I had our fucking Nobody Cares About Us version of that, and we got some really amazing art out of it. So those two records were returning to and elaborating on that energy, and kind of making like less experimental in some ways. Like it's taking less risks, because we are more aware of what we do best. So in some ways, it's kind of focusing on that in cool ways. So Crowns Down is about putting our money where our mouth is and making a record. And when I toured for those, I put out an open call to battle people on radio shows, and I battled people in different cities and had fun. It was ridiculous. So it was sort of just about this, like, in some ways it was like a late / doesn't matter when it happens response to some of the chastising and haterade that we were referencing earlier that came from lack of posturing and doing what we wanted. So like later on, when we're freestanding from the hip hop community, you can still do something that is like about that energy, and no one can say shit to you about that. That's sort of what Crowns Down is about.
Sung of the matter in the manner that held one's lone gun pen to one's hot net drum. With the kind of hunger wings one sprung from the boiler room of buildings where your heroes get hung. I think that's a true thing for me. I think to this day, I don't need it, but I don't appreciate the absence of acknowledgement as like a S-tier rapper, but I think about this sometimes, like whatever these top rap things, experimental rap, like I'm not on any of that shit. Sort of just not on the radar. That said, a lot of my favorite rappers like Saphir and the people that I aspired to one day rap in front of and impress, those people aren't on it. So I can't really, at the end of the day, complain about being where I'm at, where I feel like I'm an artist. That said, though, I still, I love to rap, and a lot of the people, my contemporaries and peers, definitely are less interesting or a shadow of their former self, and that's something I've never done. I feel like I'm still very much in the game, but it is my own lane,
Yeah, well, I was thinking about that, that it's, to me, from an outsider's perspective, it seems like you guys blew up. You were like the darlings of Pitchfork and stuff, and you didn't really have to work that hard as far as getting a lot of press and attention at that period. Plus, you had the momentum of however many people you were.
Oh, we definitely worked hard, though, just to correct. We had to start our own distributor from scratch. We got ripped off by multiple distributors. We completely I started 2 labels, both Mush and Anticon. Anticon was Soul and other people also doing some of the front-end work and publicity and learning the industry. we did this with no funding, no bankrolling, no money. So it was actually the music was heard and talked about. So that was also an impression of us standing out and getting written by things, but that's because we were taking risks and including other things, so it's almost like, because for instance, we're really just talking about like Herb Magazine and The Wire. We're not talking about everyone. Not everyone wrote about us. We're still underground, so, but I thought it was interesting that I also noticed that perception amongst others, and I actually think it was because those same people that felt like we were getting press easy, they were not accepting us into their hip-hop reindeer games. So technically, with or without a time machine, they can eat a dick. It's like they just are salty that the way we were behaving, that they weren't entirely about, some other people were,
Well, yeah. I would argue that you probably did have a little bit of an upper hand too, just because you were so unique, whereas you stood out to people that were looking for something different.
I agree. Yeah.
But it kind of struck me, like looking at what you've been doing in the last decade or more. To me, it seems like you haven't necessarily been applying yourself so much in the hip hop world, as far as like getting on, a hot label or doing a lot of press runs, or I don't really know what goes on behind the scenes, but I wonder if you've kind of like taken a step back from really pushing yourself as a quote unquote hip hop artist as part of the hip hop world.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. And then brackets around that is that the industry is dead. And when I had to get that job all those years ago doing video game sound that I didn't know how to do for shitty video games, that was me getting the message that, people say music career. And when I taught the kids in Oakland, I would tell them that's an oxymoron. Careers take care of you and, pay forward. That is not what doing music for 20 years does. So you had to be very successful and start making music either 5 years before I did, or just do an incredibly accessible music that goes pop. So, we're talking about like, not many musicians are doing that well. And some of them actually had what you and I would consider success. And I had what some consider success. So, but what it was not doing was paying the rent or creating any savings, no insurance, and then when the value of music and its ceiling became a human dollar permanently or less with all the streaming and all this jazz, it just kind of like cement shoed the already dead body and pushed it into the water. So for me, seeing that, I was like, wow, how do I still love art when I feel so betrayed by doing it this way for this long at this moment?
Yeah.
So it was actually a very real series of years for me, man. And I would wake up crying. I was going through it, I just was like, because sometimes failure is not an F and an incident. It is this like slow, invisible ink that appears as a stain on your wall gradually. And you're like, wow, what did I do? What do I do next? And I know a lot of musicians either have gone through this recently, did already, or are going to very soon. So I didn't know what I was doing, but the thing that made me successful now is my work ethic. My work ethic definitely helped me be as successful as I was in music, but it wasn't enough to live off of, and I got lucky enough to do all these games and be born again into... The interesting thing, though, is like for me to be successful, I had to take all my voice and opinions and writing and craziness out. And the second I did that, which if you would have told me at 18, 16 when I started rapping, that you'll be successful when you stop rapping, I would have been like, shut the fuck up. You're fucking crazy. And the reality is that, and it's not like a message and it's not something I abide by now, but it is a fucking trough of irony for me to be like, I'll be damned. Look at this fucking crazy ass world. So for me, I'm still reconciling with how all those years in the industry feel to me today. But I know I had to drop all of it like a bad habit because I really want to love music and be a career artist and make art till I'm dead. And that meant I had to start getting my living and livelihood somewhere else so that I could make an even higher quality art when I do feel it. And Les's orchestra was a capstone on that understanding really coming to be. And then Bren passed, and then I've been sort of frozen in a accepting way, not a caveman way. In how all that felt and went. And looking back, and Anacon dissolves as all that happens. Last record on Anacon is Les's orchestra. It was all a little too much, even for Professor Poetry over here. It was a little too much Omen, a little too much reality, a little too much, life over time. So,
yeah, I could totally understand how just seeing like diminishing returns for your efforts would be discouraging to a degree. But, as a fan, I'm glad that you've still managed to be pretty prolific. You mentioned your work ethic. I guess you do so much that you've kept me pretty satisfied, even though you have shifted gears towards the video games and stuff.
Yeah, and there's something else too, because honestly too, I always had this thing where I was like, I want to make a Boards of Canada record. I want to make cool electronic music with no voice on it. And I always said these things to myself, and I would be like, I will never have the time to do that. And it would like sting a little. And then I turned around a few years ago and I was like, look at this bitch making all these records he always wanted to make, but they're for video games. It isn't exactly what my first group of people who heard and felt my art got, and it may not strike as deep, but for me it is still all this stuff that as an artist I wanted to be guilty of before I die. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
there's like I'm starting to feel interested in how everything overlaps. And also more people listen to like the Enter the Gungeon fucking song than ever listen to anything I ever did with all my heart for rap's sake. So I don't know what to tell anybody. I'm not the fucking boss.
Do you find you're getting the same sense of satisfaction or even a greater sense of satisfaction from the video game world work that you're doing?
So fortunately, because of how eras don't overlap right now, I don't really want to make a bunch of art records. So very glad to have this to give myself to. That said, there is a level of satisfying that like pouring everything out into music as art. It's not entirely in making game work. The great things about game work, though, are, one, I work, unlike in some of the bands I've been in, where you're like dragging the horse to water and shit. Like someone's super talented, but you gotta like get them there to their own talent. It's like a thing, So once you start involving multiple people, it's a lot. It's management. It's a fucking it's a cafe of making music. So the peer group and the people I work with on these small games is like everyone wears 5 hats and everyone is brilliant in their own right and overworks but does not kill themselves, puts the creative first. So it's like fucking 1 million times more satisfying as like a core collaborator. And then there's this thing with games where like when I make my own music, it's very relative when I say it's done. It's like that. I could leave that shit in the oven for another 10 years, and twiddle with shit. But I say it's done at a point. When I work on game stuff, I really know when shit is done. for some reason. You're like, this is the catacomb level. I got it, And so adding that feather to my cap of being a creative was like never really there before. So it's sort of like, it makes me throw up in my mouth a little, but it's like professional artist goals. And it's nice to have those things. And it helped me, like, I know there's a lot of artists that do art for 20 years and are still worried it'll all go away and one day they'll be normal. But adding that wrinkle to how I create allowed me to really, because I'm self-taught, break through on all less than effective confidences regarding where my creativity comes from, how often I can do it, and how good it gets when I'm done. So it's all been good. So in a lot of ways, I like it a lot more. Plus, I fucking love playing video games. Working on them is way more work than I ever thought they would be. And I'll tell you right now, not every musician that I adore and know is cut out for the amount of work, even though their music would be amazing in a game. So, and the peers are great, man. I got to say, it's like way better than like kind of date rapey rappers that I get to hang out around. Now I'm around amazing people who like, one of the dudes I work with on Disc Room, this dude JW, his, like, my brain can do more stuff than other people. My entire brain fits in one little corner of his brain. So, like, it's amazing to plug into something greater than I can generate myself, which is being in a band as well, but it's not this playable world, so it's cool. A little bit of everything.
Do you think about legacy as an artist, like how your work will be regarded after you die? Do you care about that?
Yes, that's all I think about. That's all the death motifs, and that's why I wrote everything well and never sounded the same twice, and worked with people that I just knew I might like as people, or that I loved as musicians. And so, yeah, all about legacy, games, everything lasting forever. Fascinated by that as a kid with records and like the time travel that is allowed by, a piece of music.
Yeah. So why I asked that is that I'm thinking like the video game world, maybe I avoid video games because I have an addictive personality, so I'm not like clued into it at all. I guess there are people that really like look at the credits and know who designed this stuff, but to me it seems like it's going to be harder to leave a legacy as an artist as a video game music composer as opposed to a solo musician. Do you think about that at all?
Well, kind of. I mean, I'm already cruising to the top of hearts in games, because you are correct. There's, people are, I guess, more akin to remember band names than composers.
And like why I'm thinking about that too is I'm noticing again how it seems like you've taken a step back from the hip hop world, and it makes me like I feel like if I was your manager, even your afterlife manager, saying like, dude, if you wanted to leave a mark here, you should have been doing some collabs with Milo and Billy Woods and A$AP Rock during this past decade. Do you think about like staying part of the conversation in that way?
So straight up, no. And those dudes don't include me, and they could. So I'm not saying that I'm close to it, but I'm also not inaccessible. And I feel like if, I don't influence them or I'm not someone that they're inspired to work with, it doesn't really happen. And what I don't do is force or solicit shit to be on a scene that tries not to have me in their yearbook. You know what I'm saying? That whole group of humans, not really Milo at all. He's after my era, but all those guys, they did the distance.
I mean, times have changed though. Do you think any of that might be in your head more than
Oh, no. It's not, I don't, I'm trying to describe the way it's always felt to be myself around those people. I don't actually give a fuck, So like at this point, the amount of people that do learn about me from the games is 10 times more than Cloud Dead people were aware. I don't care that they're into it. For me, it's about the works and the creation, and I had to release myself from reception because it never really went that well for me. So, and I always was missing something because how my work hits the world, it just isn't, it doesn't resonate like that among rap, even to this day. Also, I mean, talk about things like Crowns Down. I think that holds candle to quite a bit of the shit that I've heard in the last 10 years. So where's the studying and where's the appreciation? I don't stop anyone from doing that. And I'm not talking about collaboration there, but I think it's just how the world is oriented and orienting as it moves forward. And for right now, my legacy is very much TBD, but its quality and quantity are still always amassing. So I feel like for me, more than being current in the last 2 years, my concern was that I add things to a stellar catalog that don't dilute it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
right.
I think that's really the big thing. And
that all sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I'm also not a big cameo guy. It's not something I really do.
You don't like doing features?
Nah. I mean, I like going toe-to-toe with people, like the friendly competition of being on a song, but it's not really something that I
How about collaborating? Sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
No. Yeah, I'd rather collaborate and make a body of work than take time away to put all this energy into a one-off. When I started making music, I would be on any song that you could get me on, and I would work for weeks on the verse, But that kind of shifted over to working for months on records, and cameos never kind of came back after 2003 or something.
Yeah. I was just about to say, I haven't heard you do much collaborations with other MCs lately, and then I remembered Alpha.
Walk it out and walk the seashore. These floors reinforce until we bleed more, so we believe more to achieve more, and we ever had granted or a need for.
All I want, my most these issues get finally settled. Releasing the heat so hot it disinfects metal. All I want, 1 acre that's utterly government free. And that beautiful thing.
How did that collaboration come about? How did you two decide to work together, you and Mestizo?
I met Zoe when he was a fucking young rapper, and then met him a few times over the years, and he became himself one of the best rappers I know, and I was like, yeah, this dude can hang with me, and I can hang with him, and we bounce off each other, and I feel like he's someone that I can actually stand in that aggressive space for and not speak too loudly in a way that he's not prepared to rap or handle, and that really isn't the case when I'm like rapping with Yoni, so I think sort of natural felt good. We always wanted to rap with each other, and I feel like the way that we approach it is pretty no frills. It's like white label Black Diamond Underground rap energy, and I feel like that's something I always wanted to do, but I was always more concerned with like sowing my artistic oats, so it kind of took a time-delayed seat. So Alpha we did one song together. I did a feature on a song that we had.
I remember.
Yeah, and then that sort of started that off, and honestly, man, it fucking felt natural from jump, and that's why it all happened, because it just kept feeling natural. We went through several producers on the path, that was kind of the hard thing. Still the other hard thing. I wanted to do a record with Getty too, but just couldn't find the right producer. Because for me to really rap and go all in, I can't also do the beats. It's kind of not ideal, you know?
Okay.
And so, yeah, you know, there are rappers I would love to do. I would still love to do something with Getty.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. Who else?
Who else would I rap with? Oh, I mean, there's, you know, I'd do a record with Micah. I don't know how that would happen. That would be, you know, just bucket list. Still would love to do something with Buck, 65, one of my favorites of all time. What else? I'm trying to think of people that I could actually access and get. I don't know. Most people that I really love, like Ka, I don't know if we'd sound good on a record together, but a lot of my most recent favorites, just appreciate from the sidelines. I'm trying to think of who else. I'd love to do another record with Yoni too before I drop dead, which would be great.
Yeah.
You know.
How about another Themselves album? You think we'll ever see that?
Yeah, I'd love to, man. Me and Jeff, one of these fucking days, got to get him out here to my little house and fucking studio up. Yeah, I'd love to return to that. You know, it's like we just went through such a long adventure. The break that we took after all that work after the second 13 and God, sort of like more than it was a break from each other. It was a break from fucking gas stations all year and touring and like, you know, we didn't know how to. We haven't really had this conversation together, but I think there's a great deal, at least on my side, of like us never knowing how to say to each other, like, damn, this has good parts, but man, the shitty parts suck. You know what I mean? And I think because we were always living a dream and you don't want to admit that some parts of your choices are making the metal on metal sound for you. It used to be music to your ears, but it's not anymore. And so it was very like...
You're talking about touring or the music itself?
Music industry, not the music itself. Touring and, you know, like... Because you spend a half a year, you get everything ready and together, and then it kind of goes not double as good. And that sort of becomes a thing, you know? So it's about expectations, and sometimes it's hard to have low expectations for the thing you believe the most in the world. I think that's a lesson I'm still learning, will always be learning.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, and I realized as I was reading the lyrics, this is mostly a pedestrian song, but the Generation of Deadbeats track is, I think it's possibly the first time I heard you. And I was always kind of wondering about the inspiration behind that song and what you guys were talking about. I have my own like half-assed interpretation of it, but I'd be more curious to hear your thoughts.
Oh man, I'd have to...
It's old.
Listen to it to like speak truth to the flame, but I know that it was about...
All right, let me tell you my interpretation.
Yeah, go for it.
Maybe that'll remind you a little bit about it. It seemed to be like you were reckoning with the work of previous like trailblazers in your tradition, looking critically at the beat poets, or I wasn't sure if it was critically or not, but there seemed to be some commentary on their sort of starry-eyed attempts to break the mold, to go beyond the mortal coil, if you will, of like escaping reality or something like that.
So,
and then,
go ahead, finish up.
But then you were also following in their footsteps to a degree, but with more of a sense of like hopelessness or nihilism, perhaps, like understanding that we're all doomed to wander the earth until we die.
Yeah.
As opposed to them being like part of this, you know, age of Aquarius kind of a...
Yeah, the hippie, I mean, very different context for them coming to writing prose and us coming from urban areas and being influenced by rap and brevity and raw as opposed to refined, you know? And I think that even though the beats were the rawest prose had ever been at their time, and that was the ground they broke. So meanwhile, we were living in Berkeley, so I think these motifs and artists and works were super prevalent for us, both myself and Brandon the pedestrian. And you're totally correct about more or less speaking to us being post-beat. So everything they did happened and the world is still how it is. And here we are again, coming at this same voicing, like a voice that isn't loud, so it's not respected. So like just choosing words wisely, being artsy in a world that only cares for the man hour.
Somebody give me a hero and I'll author a tragedy yet. Murder in the theater in an idle afternoon. Produce up and death, me and don't create, but do play chess in the park until the curators and clerics proceed to their quarters. Heretics in the paradise of Fitzgerald in the alleys of Frisco.
You know, it seems like a lot of the beats were like pissing, not the rugged ones like Corso and Kaufman, but they were like pissing their parents off because they were blowing their college by being poets, you know, and that's how they were shaking it up. And then they made great poetry that shook up the status quo for poetry. And for us, we were out just on our own, trying to live off of rap, selling CDs, and all meeting each other, being like cipher rats and rap fiends and getting poetic. So I think there was, for us also too, what I was speaking about earlier, I think that song is sort of a tent pole in the aligning of having a poetic aesthetic that is being merged with a technical chop and rap aesthetic. So about cadence and styling. So Brandon was a big purveyor of all that, as was I. So that was I think that is also what that song is like, boiling to a crack, is where those two things meet as they met for us in that year.
Yeah. Part of that song, one of your lines is, at least as it's transcribed that I read, no man is island and everything has already been done once. But it sounds like you're saying no man is island.
Yeah, no man is island. Yeah. It's a mispronounce.
Because it sounded better?
Yeah,
or
it was, that was having fun with things. And then that's also the title of a subtle song on Hero for Fool.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so all motifs, all ruts are stayed in. But I think, and that was like, that was a fun time too, because, you know, we were really opening up in style and execution and writing at the same time. It'll never be like that again for me. It was like that first time you eat some new potato chip and you're like, fuck, I could eat these forever. And then eventually you never eat them. You know, so there's this, that was really the era where like the sky was always blue and the grass was always green, and it's a beautiful thing. I think about it all the time.
Did you feel at that time like you were breaking molds and doing really new stuff, or was it more like the idea that everything has already been done once and you were just rearranging the pieces? Or
that's more of a poetic heuristic for living one's life. I think that we definitely, I mean, that style alone that I'm doing on that hook is not repeatable in time, you know? So I think we were definitely breaking molds in ways, some less amazing than others, but there was a lot of stuff that we did for the first time and doubled down on things like, you know, the absence of rhyme and meter and still sounding good and styling and trying all sorts of things, you know? So I think as well as different content for songs and context for songs and themed albums and, it was a bit of like, we definitely, again, everything, I think that line is because, you really can't do anything new. Everything's a composite invention these days. The telephone pole is 4 different inventions glued together, So I think it's more being honest with that, but owning it as we do our best to outdo ourselves. I don't think it's like, me personally, people have lists. You mentioned it when we first started talking about who's in their top 3 and top 5, and I have those, but I'm not in mine. I'm not Kanye. You know what I'm saying? Like, my fucking list is people that I would never compare myself to, and the ground they broke is broken ground that I forever appreciate and reference. So for me, it's about doing the wildest I can, not following suit or putting someone in my dust. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, although I am, all that aggressive stuff is true too, but not really in competition with the greatest. And that's who I think I do make music hoping that one day someone like that hears it and likes it, or I've always thought about someone being uniquely inspired to make uniquely their music by my music some years from now. And that is valuable to me. More than many people or modern underground rap Twitter being about me, I am more concerned with like Fred Savage III getting his hands on something I did and it just turning him on like a light, to do whatever they do.
Let's talk about death, which is a theme that comes up a lot in your work, from the album Slow Death to various appearances of skulls and skeletons and stuff. You alluded to it a little bit already, but can you talk about that more and how your attitude towards death has informed your art as well as your approach to life in general?
Yeah, so I had, when I was a kid, I had a pretty intense, when I was very young, things were good, and then things got very intense when I was just with my mother in my childhood, and it was pretty abusive, and I remember I didn't believe in very much, but I was like out of love with my parents at 11, 12, and that put a tint on the world, Yeah. And I remember, so not a lot of belief coming through me. I still liked, fucking, it was the purple transformer that always stayed on Cybertron, Galvatron, I don't know. I still liked certain toys, and I liked some stuff, and I liked rap, and I liked to, throw rocks at stuff and shit, but,
The sound is going to be like this for the next 12 minutes or so I'm sorry, but it's like the best part of the interview, so please bear with us as Dose takes us through his conceptions of death, faith, and the afterlife, or lack thereof.
Basically, there was this porch in my friend's house that we would go under, and he found this dead cat wrapped in paper, and I would go there as a little kid. So the song Dead Cat Clear and Dead Cat Clear 2 are both about this. And I would go and sit and put this cat in my lap and just like, because I love cats. I had a cat that I rescued when I was a really little kid, and I was like, wow. And it just kind of spoke to me, and death was, people say like, this spoke to me, and now I do it, whether it's meditation or proper religion or the absence of religion. This death was like rigid and believable, and I understood that this was all that was imminent, and maybe everything between born and death is, frivolous. You attach stuff to it, but you got to make the most of it. So it sort of was like my broke-ass belief system. And so I revere and believe in death. I do not fear it, but I know it's the big guy in the neighborhood. It's the older brother of all things that comes to fuck you up. And so I sort of started to pronounce and understand and articulate that belief with my prose, because again, I'm trying to be honest. And what am I going to talk about? I don't really believe in politics. I don't believe in religion. I don't believe in heaven. So these are my things I deeply believe in, and my legacy and what I choose to spend my mind and words on was like a substantial reference and understanding of this relationship to death, and therefore freezing myself in song and art is anti-death, is a noble way to spend a life. And this is sort of what I truly believe. It's not many things. It doesn't make me a wealthy man in the belief department, but I really stood by these things, that being a maker, creating in the world, these are the noble things, and you're going to die. And so that was kind of how that all panned out, and I felt like it was always like middle class, some really well-worded poems about anxiety. These were and are my overarching motifs, and I think things that I feel like I can shed a little light on that aren't total bullshit if Kid X 20 years from now is listening, trying to be timeless, So that's sort of where a lot of that shit comes from, and just kind of embraced it. It's my mascot, a little skull, striped skull. So that's also all fairness and being honest. So the striped skull and striped faces and subtle is about a referee Hamlet yelling at your own skull in your hand, sort of be honest with your death. It's honestly, that is me just rephrasing, like going to a big gate and they're like, let me look at your life, and they're like, you're going to hell, you're going to heaven. It's that, be honest with your life in the face of your death is sort of my working man's thing. But again, none of that is ever expressly stated, because that's preachy shit that I don't really do or share, But if I'm summarizing, that's sort of where it's all getting,
Are you an atheist?
I guess I want to say I'm an agnostic, because if somehow the universe's most delinquent god did show up next Thursday on my lawn with lightning bolts, I would be like, alright man, let me fucking hear you. Okay, sign my garage door for me. So I think I don't pretend to, that's part of my deep understanding, is I don't pretend to know shit beyond this mortal coil and the wake-up factor. So, there's definitely no heaven, and I think it's proven by people saying there's a dog heaven, because is there cat heaven? How much real estate? What are we doing here? How does this all work? I need to see some paperwork and some blueprints of these clouds and how everything is stratified. Also, I think it's I don't know, I guess it's intelligence, emotional intelligence, but I think after a while, once you're exposed to and open to understanding what several religions are about, it's hard not to understand that they're prescribing you tenets for being a decent human being, and you can do that on your own, and you're still gonna die. So it's like, I don't think. Also, the cat thing that was what I understood. I was like, and this is what I can and can't explain. I can't explain away everyone's heaven alternatives. But what I can explain is I look at these, I've seen dead bodies, dead humans, I've seen dead animals, and it didn't go anywhere. The soul, it's not somewhere. It's not in the cloud. It did not shrink and become a seed. It is just done when it's over. And down to my atoms and how they're oriented, this is understood by me. Whereas all religion, I would always be like, yeah, and I needed more explanation to understand or whatever. So it's one of those things.
Overwhelmed by desperation.
Yeah, it seems like people often use faith, and I'll just say I identify with not having a faith, but I wonder, since people seem to use faith to ignore the finality of death and possibly allows them to be happy
Yes.
or ignorant of, the harshness of life. I wonder, do you get sad?
Because of that? No, I think, and also too, to be clear, I am not, in my death belief, I am not someone who takes beliefs from them. I grew up around like really intense black, white, and Puerto Rican households that believe in God and the fucking Yankees, and in this world, with what I believe combined with what they believe, I know they're all gonna fucking die, so why not be happy? If it is prescribed to you by Cheese Whiz, Jesus, or fucking Daryl Strawberry, I don't give a shit, load up on it. So I've never been someone that needs other people's stuff to be untrue for mine to be true. That said, I don't get sad because I'm gonna die. I fucking make shit, man. I'm like into it. It's like, and even after losing my dear best friend, I am still shook by it all, but in my heart of hearts, I just want to make. It's what he wants and I want and people like us want to do in our lives, So, and a little love and sharing some joy. We get a lot of joy out of that. It's where you find your joy. Being a creator there's aspects that are long hours, but the actual birthing that you do when you finish a thing it's tantamount to people like us, to whatever everyone else is getting off on entirely, a good mountain bike ride or a fucking breakfast smoothie. I don't know. Whatever's satisfying people, that shit constitutes life.
Now, we've talked about aggression and death, and also we've been going a long time, so I'm gonna end it soon. Let you go, and maybe sometime we can have a part 2 because I do have a ton more questions. But
yeah, totally, man.
Anyway, you mentioned love just briefly, and that reminds me how you've always struck me from an outsider's perspective as, a nasty battle rapper, unemotional, mysterious, almost like a serpentine-like person. And you've identified with cats and sharks as opposed to more friendly animals like dogs or monkeys. You seem almost like inhuman or superhuman as far as your vocal skills are concerned, like a cyborg maybe, and you speak in like an alien tongue that's hard to decipher. So I wonder, 2-part question: Has this been a conscious choice to present yourself in this way?
No. I've always just been finding myself, and I think that I came from an art form that, when I was coming up in rap, everyone was always like, you gotta sound one way and sound that way forever. That's how you do it. That's how you do well. That's how people know it's you. So I did that, and then I firmly rejected that as I started to find myself, and changing my voice and my content and styling is what I realized is the true, at least for me, that's the pinnacle. It was like, who's got the most styles? I want 2 people to go into a room, and one guy's like, have you ever heard of Kool Mo-D? And the guy's like, no. And he's like, listen to all these styles. And then that guy's like, have you ever heard of Dose? And then he shows him all my styles. And God bless Kool Mo-D, but I've done a lot more. So I feel like it's this, it's just, I wanted to always change. That's the kind of creative I was always feeling like I was and am and became. So it wasn't really conscious. It was like what kind of had to happen, but that said, and
I, as a listener, just to interject, I I appreciate that because I don't like hearing melodramatic or what I see as melodramatic expressions of emotion and, this made me sad, this makes me happy kind of stuff. But it just doesn't work for me. So I'm glad that you present yourself in that way.
No, I think that's what I always wanted to, and those are my favorite artists. So I just wanted to be dead and in the league that I'm in based on the energy that I spent, on songs. So I think that was sort of what I was doing, and that's my peer group, everyone in Anacon, the people that I knew when I was first drawn to start to make my own music, and then all the people that came before me that were insane, and so that's sort of, between all that, I just had to sort of move forward. And also, what I definitely didn't see around me was anything like that. So it was not like that was divisive, but it was encouragement. I was like, am I the only one not scared to do whatever next, and that became like a truth that I liked occupying.
If you would be willing to expose yourself for our audience, in an effort to get behind the stony veneer, I'd like to ask you if you'd be willing to talk about the last time you were sad, or what tends to make you sad in general, and what fills your heart with love or brings you joy.
Okay, so the last time I was sad, man, I had a really fucking rough year when I moved out here, and I was very alone, and I moved to a place that I did not choose, and I had a split with my partner. This job was supposed to be all about artists changing the world, and it was actually about sexual predators forming a corporation, and I had to just be the fuck out, and I felt very spent on the other. That combined with Anticon dissolving, losing Bren at the same time, music career being that oxymoron that I explained earlier. Even though games and everything was doing well, a great sadness came over me, and I pretty much had meltdown is a strong term. Liquefied is what I did. There were points where I was incredibly sad, but for the most part, it was a complete liquefaction of who I have always been since being an abused child, rearranging my life to not just be a display of my most elaborate defenses. Because I don't need to do that anymore. Quite safe from a lot of the things that have run me ragged over the years at this point. And so through all that, I just made a lot of choices. I really cut down people that have access to me. I don't do social media. I don't post anything personal. I fucking hate social media. I'm glad the whole world has it. Kudos, let's party. But I'm done. I think it's hollow, and I get nothing out of it. So I use it as it serves me, which is an extension of stuff I do. It's like a bulletin board that's made of cork for me, and I stick things on it when they're done. So pulling that energy back into my life, pulling all that shit back, and really healing to no longer regard myself as cursed because my life was difficult in the beginning. I was always just waiting for the worst and preparing for the worst, and really didn't let a lot of joy in for very long. It would I'm a very funny person, so I would let it run around the house for 5 minutes, and then I would put it back in a box. So that was my last couple years, and now I'm feeling much better. Got an amazing therapist, been fucking doing that work, and everything is benefiting. So, and then love throughout my life, when I went to go into all this intense therapy to unpack my traumatic childhood, this is all TMI, but the only thing I had to use as a resource memory as something that I've loved my entire life was cats. I fucking shit you not, because people were fucking me up from a very early age. So it was what I cued in on, and I was like, no, actually, I'm not pathological or a psychopath. I do know love. I've always loved unabashedly animals, specifically house cats, because I wasn't around any other animals, so that was what I used. And to this day, my two girls, they're the greatest thing, and that grounds me. And then I've been letting love into my life in other ways now that I'm off planet defense only. But it's been a really long road for me to open up and sort of make room in my life for anything other than survival. So all this artsy music and endeavors I've done, the overmath has been this like rigidity of survival, not really having a future, money, and no path really laid out. We're just kind of throwing wood under our feet as we run. That was all of Anticon all those years. And so, it started to gang up on me, but now things are I'm feeling a lot safer thanks to games and my work ethic, not really my talent. That's the other thing that I told those kids that I taught to rap. I was like, yeah, you can be the best at something, but it might be something just next to that actually takes care of you in the world. And that largely just means financially, but eventually financial, like less of the sky falling financially actually is a fucking great lubricator for things like feeling safe and possibly happy. Doesn't fix any of that shit. Money does nothing for any of those feelings showing up, but not being broke is a fucking, I don't know, man. It's a thing. It's a way. It's a religion. It'll keep you away for a very long time. You know what I mean? So.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you found ways to get on the path of bettering yourself. And the final question, what would you say has been the greatest therapy in allowing yourself to open up over time, from art to actual therapy to anything else?
Man, I got to say, so all the art therapy, kicking rocks, drawing circles, repeated, whatever kind of therapy there is, riding a bike, all that shit, the physical, it's not really the work. It burns off the bile and static that is created by trauma. It can dampen. For some people, they've been through enough that they need a bouquet of several fucking therapies, like myself. So I now exercise all the time, do my art, clean the fucking house, garden, pet the cats, you know what I mean? And all of this is necessary to burn off the excess that I create. And I think that the reality is, though, real therapy is what was the real work. But a lot of people, the big thing, this is what I tell my dad, anyone about fucking therapy, especially men, they're like legal, excuse it, we use a hard R, but they're legally retarded about fucking therapy. So a lot of men. So it's like, if you go and you lie to your therapist, it's just going to be like every other thing you got yourself through trying to come off as okay. If you go and you unabashedly look down in a positive way on your life, look down upon your life, not at it, it's fucking, it's the real work, man. And I did also a good therapist. You got the wrong therapist, that's never going to work for you. But eventually, if you can trust their intellect and expertise, and they're actually trained in dealing with what you went through, therapy helped. Even though shit was fucked up to happen to me, I'm not that unique. Kind of normal, like in the greater scheme of all the people that have been fucked up over time. So the only time I ever really believed that and started like healing around that truth is after fucking trained therapist was like, yeah, this really happened to you, it's all real, but a whole lot of people went through very similar things. You can consider this a norm, and that helped me move through a lot of the shit that I wasn't really ready to weed out of my life or replace with something that wasn't just anxiety and fear and survival, you know? Because I was basically, all that stuff is the fastest burning coal, and that was all I lived off of because it was all I knew. So therapy was amazing for that. It just sort of stopped running off that all the time, but I didn't know what else I would run off. So there was just a long period. It's like you throw everything out of a house and then you're just in an empty house. And I spent quite a while in that space. But now, starting to fill back up again.
For another 15 minutes of my talk with Doseone and Andrew Mbaruk's review of Dose's G is for Deep album, you can pay a measly $3 at patreon.com/weirdrap. And you'll also get all of our past amazing bonus content. Now, I'm excited to present the first in a series of segments coming to you courtesy of our correspondent Anthony Cloward, aka Eb&Flow. This is episode 1 of Rap Grifters.
What's up, folks? My name's Eb&Flow. I'm a rapper, animator, producer, and commentator from Cincinnati, Ohio. I want to talk to you today about an issue I think is a threat to hip-hop as we know it, grifters and rap culture. First of all, some people may not know what I mean by grifter, so I'll start with a simple definition and explain what I mean as we go. A grifter is a person who engages in petty or small-scale swindling. In other words, a snake oil salesman, someone who sells things that they don't believe in. I'm here talking to you today because I predict a growing wave of grifters in the coming years will attempt to appropriate and colonize rap culture, more so than it has been already, to redirect the political narrative of the culture to become more conservative-leaning. There's significant evidence that this pattern is already happening in front of our eyes, and my fear is, if hip-hop as a culture fails to make it clear where we stand politically as we have in the past, we risk the narrative of our culture being seized and redirected by people who aren't involved in the culture and don't care about it beyond the political capital of the black community. I have to stop and acknowledge the appropriation issue. Some people, maybe a lot, maybe a few, will look at me as a white rapper and perceive me automatically as a part of the appropriation problem. The talk of white artists posing the same threat of appropriation as to jazz, rock and roll, and most other American genres is not new, and it's also fair. I won't sit here and argue against that because that's what I signed up for. But I'm here to tell you that there are real appropriators setting up shop within this culture, and they want to use the magic of the culture to convince black people and hip-hop listeners to embrace anti-black conservative agendas that we have fought against for decades. There's a difference between an Eminem or an Action Bronson, who clearly benefit from their skin color but also clearly use their platform to contribute, and a Tom McDonald, who is an obvious poser and grifter that wants to use hip-hop as a vehicle to capitalize on anger and dejection that festers within white demographics. Who does that remind you of? But more on that later. My point is, I believe a political reckoning is imminent within hip-hop culture. During the last 4 years of Trump, the culture has largely failed to stand up against his novel form of bigotry. Aside from a hit song here or there, political rap has effectively been neutralized as a force of social pressure and change. As a fan and student and progenitor of this craft, I find that simply unacceptable. And now that Trump is out of the public eye, online environments are primed for seemingly grassroots movements funded by wealthy conservatives to do everything that they can to seed and spread ideas that benefit them within a culture that they view as valuable and vulnerable. And trust me when I say that they do view us as vulnerable, and they've got their foot in the door. There's a lot to talk about here. I want to give more examples and give you guys some sources to research and decide for yourselves. But for now, I'll leave you with the example laid out by J. Cole in his track 1985. The song, which fans have presumed is about Lil Pump, explains the difference between building a loyal, honest fan base that will support you as an artist through the hardest of times, and a temporary, trend-based fan presence that will pay for concert tickets and blow up your bank account in the short term, but will inevitably abandon you once the trend that you rode in on has passed. The contrast between these two artists couldn't be a better example, age difference aside, and the lack of shows during coronavirus is a great litmus test. Where do you see J. Cole? You don't. He's built a strong enough fan presence that he doesn't need to do stunts or be visible to continue his business. He has control of his music and puts his artists in positions to have control of theirs, and the fans support. Where do you see Lil Pump? on stage at a Trump rally, smiling like a child as one of the most racist public figures in recent history calls him Lil Pimp. I assure you all, he was most definitely paid for this, or at least he was supposed to be. This is the difference between someone who is dedicated to this culture and someone who is a grifter. Grifters go where the money is, they say what they need to say, and they don't care who's paying them. They're also useful idiots, happily trotting out the agenda of someone more powerful than them as long as they get their check. Because of the infinite political value of black people in America, these grifters will not stop trying to carve out pieces of our culture for themselves. And if every artist that considers themselves true to hip-hop doesn't decide now where we stand and use our voices and platforms to challenge the intentions of those who spread anti-black propaganda within our ranks, we could lose the narrative of this culture for good.
For more of Eb&Flow's commentaries, music, and animation, check out his YouTube channel, Eb&Flow. That's E-B_FLOW. And stay tuned for our next episode of Rap Grifters, which is going to take a look at the rapper Tom MacDonald. Spoiler alert, he's a fucking piece of garbage. Now I'm very proud to announce the first edition of Weird Rap Horoscopes with none other than Kool Keith, godfather of weird rap. I can't believe I made this happen, but I have secured recordings of Keith for at least the next 10 episodes, and I'm really happy about it. So here we have it.
Yeah. It's the Weird Rap Horoscopes of Kool Keith. Check your horoscope. Aries, comb your dog. Taurus, don't go outside. Geminis, buy a horse. Cancers, dig a hole, stick your head in it for 2 hours. Leos, burn down your house. Virgos, mate with another species. Libras, start a risky business. Scorpios, watch the night sky for a secret clue. Sagittarius, eat some cold porridge. Capricorns, stick a ski pole in your eye. Aquarius, walk backwards for 1 day. Pisces, make a snowman in your mind.
Last month, Weird Rap Records released the album Papier-Mâché Chalet, featuring the beautiful, poetic raps of Andrew Mbaruk. It's a deeply artsy album, and I really had no expectations of it appealing to very many people, but I've been really surprised at the reception it's gotten. Bandcamp listed it in their best hip-hop albums of the month, which is amazing to me because it's really weird. And now there's even a pretty significant label talking about re-releasing it on vinyl and stuff. The point is, if you're not already, I urge you to get on board with Andrew Mbaruk here on the ground floor because I think he's a genius and the world's not going to be able to ignore him for much longer. And once he's dead of a drug overdose or something, you'll be able to say, yeah, I was listening to him back in 2021. Now, Andrew is a unique guy. He didn't even want to do an interview, and he only agreed to it if I sent him the questions and allowed him to record his answers on his own. So next you're going to hear that correspondence, followed by Andrew's guided tour through the album. Basically, it's a synopsis of each song with some audio snippets. And here he is, Andrew Mbaruk.
You've been hesitant to do a live interview because you're concerned about being unable to properly express your thoughts. I wonder, considering how prolific and rich your lyrics and other writings are, why do you think it is that you have trouble with coming up with the right words in conversation?
Because of both my illness and the medication I'm on, I've become more self-consciously uncertain about everything that I say. I was pretty comfortable with speaking before in my early 20s. Then I had a psychotic episode, and since then I've been more careful.
I'm assuming that your huge vocabulary and apparently vast array of literary references, ranging from philosophy to poetry to classical novels and plays, comes from a history of absorbing a lot of writing and having a pretty good memory for it. So I wonder, were you exposed to complex writing at an early age? And what has been your general history and orientation towards reading and writing, beginning as far back as you can remember? In other words, how did you get so smart? And would you consider your relatively high capacity for understanding and creating complex literary works to be a product of nature or nurture?
Some nature, much nurture. I read a lot when I was a child. Then I got into literary fiction, the Faulkners, the Philip Roths, the Don DeLillos when I was a teenager. Then got into poetry, the Hart Cranes, the John Ashberys, the Frank O'Haras. Then I studied literature at the University of Toronto. And at the University of Toronto, I had to read a lot of different literature. So there's an element of natural insanity in my brain, but my style is more the product of the teaching of many professors and a lot of reading, learning things that were impressed onto my brain by other people. So, like I said, some nature, but much nurture.
So it's generally agreed upon that there are a lot of different types of intelligence. The psychologist Howard Gardner popularized a theory of 8 different major types of intelligence. Now, I've already tooted your horn about how smart you are when it comes to language, but are there any ways in which you think you're dumb? And do you agree with Gardner's theory?
I agree with that theory. And I'm manifoldly dumb, logically and mathematically dumb, and spatially.
What's your favorite book, or who is your favorite author?
The main thing I read is poetry. And because there are many poetry collections and long poems I love, I couldn't pick one poet or book. But if we're talking authors like prose fiction, maybe Mark Lehner. I'd thought of him as probably not worth reading because of an essay by David Foster Wallace where he really seems to hate Lehner's first novel, My Cousin, My Gastroenterologist. But then I read Et tu, Babe, Lehner's second novel, and David Foster Wallace is entirely wrong about Mark Lehner.
Who is your favorite rap lyricist besides yourself, and why?
Billy Woods. The reason is he's doing so many things in his raps all at once. There's gravity, there's humor, and great rhymes. Known Unknowns is, I think, in particular, one of the most perfect albums I have ever heard. There's not much of an influence of Woods or of most rappers on my writing, though. I should make that clear.
Of all the music genres, why do you think it is that rap music specifically resonates with you?
I think anyone who's interested in poetry should be interested in rap. It's an idiotic mistake not to get into rap if you like wordplay.
What do you hope to gain by sharing your art with the world?
There's the fun of creating in someone the same enjoyment I experience when I read a groovy poem or listen to a groovy song. And I think what I'm doing, in particular with an album like Newman Nature or Grand Lunatic, is unusual, both the music and the words, and I do hope to inspire other poets to do something similar. As I say on the song Eminem Hanged, since I'm on the mic, you could go next. I don't mean everything I say in my raps literally, but in that case, I feel like, yes, I do mean that.
Do you feel like you're progressing as an artist? And if so, how?
I'm regressing currently into linear thinking and thematic coherence with the album I'm working on right now, Ancient Futurity, a complete chronicle of the Earth and the universe from the beginning until the end of time. I hope to return to disorganized thinking and an absence of clear themes later this year.
You often refer to drug use in your works, even more taboo drugs like cocaine, crack, and heroin. If it's not too personal, can you talk about your relationship with substances, how that might affect your art, and why it is that you reveal your drug habits when a lot of others would choose to hide these behaviors, especially the ones that are widely regarded as dangerous or destructive?
In confessional poetry, the poetry that Sylvia Plath and Robert Lowell wrote, poets will admit into their writing such things as their drug use. One of my favorite of the confessional poets, John Berryman, will always be associated with alcohol, his alcoholism. Some of my choices, like titling a song Bipolar Disorder and Cocaine Dependence on the album Schizoaffective Disorder and Cannabis Dependence, or referring to cocaine on the track Gone Fishin', and so on and so on. These are choices inspired by Berryman's candor in the Dream Songs. I've tried most of these drugs, though cannabis and alcohol are my preferred substances.
In relation to your accounts of drug use, what, if any, are your thoughts about the responsibility of the artist as a role model to their audience?
It may be true that a popular artist, especially a pop artist, has a responsibility to be a good role model for their impressionable audience. But I'm not writing for kids.
You changed your name recently from Lil Ghostwriter back to your given name, Andrew Mbaruk. What made you decide to do that?
I'm rapping using my real name again, Andrew Mbaruk. Calling myself Andrew Mbaruk connects the stuff I'm doing now back to the stuff I was doing using my real name before. The books. Books like Phonotextual, a novel in mono, my experimental novel in verse, and The Little Green Christs, my screenplay that I published last year, I think.
And now we'll take a quick tour through the album Papier-Mâché Chalet, guided by our gracious host.
The words of Papier-Mâché Chalet are inspired by the art of collage. Papier-Mâché Chalet is an environment in which to enjoy words, arranged in collage-like poetic bundles which we could call raps. The words of each song collect around a different theme, but each song is an instance of the same process, so it also makes sense to think of Papier-Mâché Chalet as like one collage with 14 sections. The first track, Black Skin, White Masks, begins with many N-words. Unnatural, navel-gazing, unstable raving, nevermore Nagasaki, nuclear as the family, non-stop these notoriously big, novel, invisible men, their nooks and hovels as up the nostrils, these narcotics navigating inwardly, Nostos of the Navy, spitting N-words into the sea, the nomenclature under N replete. It's inspired by The Black Man in Language, a section of Black Skin, White Masks by Frantz Fanon. Using white language, appropriating white culture as a black man, painting with words of ideas about whiteness and blackness. This is what I am doing with the first track. The second track, The Dead Father, is a song about this Canadian life, describing a day in the psyche of Lil Ghost Rider, a complicated jumble of associations conjured by our Lil Ghost Rider despite the disapproval of the dead father in all his forms. God, the government, Lil Ghost Rider, a sinner and criminal. Ejected from medical school, this would-be doctor turned philosopher, declaring entropy cool and letting these decompositions phosphoresce. Dead in a red pool, this bloody cop shot in the head. Enemies betting on the news and watching these talking heads as the colony's constitution to the third song, The Soul, is a song ostensibly about the soul and metempsychosis, but equally about Lil Ghost Rider's rhymes, his life as a poet. More nonsense, more self-aggrandizement, some more rhymes about truth. Metempsychosis, red and white roses, metamorphoses, getting more closely acquainted with the night. Quixote, bathed in light, hydrangeas and hyacinths, heavy lies the diadem, getting highly high with him. This ghost rider. The next track is the first interlude and contains various contradictions. The track after that, Paradiso, the guiding idea informing every decision made in those lyrics is the idea of paradise. It's a rap with a heavenly, cloudy vibe, referring to the movement of the planets as Dante's Paradiso features the planets. Sinisterly wintry in his head, blinkeredly, winkingly, in bed with the criminals and the feds. Through the liminality led, getting mad at these letters for expressing his darkest dreams. Hardly green using coal, my body's just the machine, I'm just the prole, ungodly, my serene lack of control. You want me to mean the facts I spit to be told backwards. Foolishly, in this song, Cyclopes is mispronounced to rhyme with binds with ropes and high on coke. Aleph is another song about language, how it dissembles necessarily, how we dwell in mistranslation, arranging the alphabet to mirror the verities which are complicated, manifold. We impose order, we simplify. The track Black Athena is a painting with words about culture and criticism and the way we think about art.
Get an Egyptologist drunk. We can give him a couple of beers and then ask him what he really thinks about Egyptian chronology, and you'll get quite a different answer from the sort of thing that you'd get in the printed pages of a book.
Those racist, unfeeling land surveyors. The negation of being this rap singer, dreaming a postmodern long poem as Ashbury. Yellow Dogs is another painting, this one red, orange, and yellow. With Inferno, the idea informing the vibe of the song was hell.
Medium. Spirit. Solvent.
Sounding deep in the slime as it rose, counting sheep with the eyes shut closed. Sounding deep in the slime as it rose, and counting sheep with the eyes shut. Rolling in my 7-8 coupe, knowing the police as the KKK a hate group. We came on the sloop, John beat her suit as the cute dog with fleas, scratching his body to the beat, boxy as the Jeep. The next interlude, the second and final interlude, contains more contradictions. The track Gender Trouble is made of wordplay oriented around gender, partly inspired by a Derrida interview passage in an essay I read. It also contains references to Judith Butler, Hélène Cixous, and Julia Kristeva. Why not? Suppressing the semiotic order and the maternal aspects of language. Vilification of this weirdo feminine, insubordination of the weaker element, a widow spider, this lil ghost writer, preying on the other side of the binary, the signified signifying these numinal long tails. Then there's a track called Minor Ghost, which is a poem about how I am and how the critics and doctors try to understand my being. It's about my ghostly nature. I'm the Bach writing his fugue in G minor, this little ghost writer. His psychogeography, while living as postmodern a G as it's possible to be.
He knew that Freud had a genius for brushing up against the truth and passing it by, then filling the void with associations. He knew that Freud knew nothing about wolves, or anuses for that matter. The only thing Freud understood was what a dog is.
Then there's a track called Little Court Jester, which is a poem about the place of the Black Canadian in Canada. There's a bit of anachronistic surrealism in the freed slaves appearing on television in one of the lyrics of the song. Strange rhymes, very strange rhymes. And the final track, Loop Quantum Gravity, it's a silly song about holding on to one's sense of wonder and thankfulness, keeping up with the science, and staying awake to the ways of the world. Perplexed as he read the signification of the phallus, who among those real among us cannot relate? So that's Papier-Mâché Chalet.
You can get Papier-Mâché Chalet via WeirdRap.com. It's also been co-released by Audio Recon and You Don't Deserve This Beautiful Art. And it's on all the other usual music platforms. Well, thank you for listening, everyone. Once again, you can access this episode's bonus content with more of Dose, more of Andrew, and you'll also get a ton of other bonus content from the past featuring Anti-Pop Consortium, New Kingdom, Ad Nostam, Orko Elohim, and more for just $3 tiny at patreon.com/weirdrap. Before I go, for the love of God, please, I beg you, please, give this podcast a rating and review. I think only 2 fucking people have done it so far, which is really kind of insulting because there's like 1,000 people downloading every episode. And I'm warning you, again, I'm not going to be able to keep this podcast up if we don't start getting some proper attention from the algorithms, and that won't happen unless you selfish, lazy assholes take 1 goddamn minute and give us a rating and review. I even created a URL that will take you as close as I can get you to Apple's ratings page. It's weirdrap.com/rating. Thank you very much in advance. As Doseone would concur, the only guarantee in life is death. So, while you walk this earthly plane, experience its wilds, and leave a legacy. A good one. A weird one. Make the world weirder.